Warning. The following video contains strong language that some viewers may find offensive or disturbing.
Serious in opposition of what's on front page now. Therapists of Reddit. What are things people do thinking it's normal but really are indicators of a more serious issue? Lack of boundaries, often manifested as being unable to say no in social situations, oversharing personal details early in a relationship, or most dangerous of all, not respecting boundaries of others as default. If someone uses fear, obligation or guilt, or experiences these from someone else on a regular basis as part of a normal relationship dynamic, that's a pretty clear sign the person has some rather serious issues. Either as a chronic victim of abuse or perpetrator, healthy boundaries are mandatory for a healthy relationship. That goes for family, romantic, and friendship. This hits hard. My mother is an expert at using guilt trips to get her way. Due to growing up with that, I feel extreme anxiety when I have to tell someone no. Instead, I'll bend over backwards and rearrange everything that I can to be able to complete that task. I also struggle with establishing my own boundaries and enforcing them. It seems like an impossible expectation. Why would anyone respect me enough to do what I ask of them? The most common one I deal with is people quieting their thoughts, feelings in relationships. It actually leads to serious issues down the road, and if you do it long enough you become a really resentful, angry person. Build close relationships really quickly. Like when you super connect with someone really quickly and the relationship becomes intense, whether it's friends or intimate partner. Therapist here. Things I commonly see on Reddit that are treated as normal, constantly seeking external validation. Believing that it's normal for everyone to have a therapist as constant lifelong support. That not having a strong social support system is okay. That not taking care of yourself is okay. And self-deprecating. I can go into more detail if others are wondering why. Workaholics. In my experience, always wanting to be working is usually a sign that they are trying to fill something that is missing in their life, a meaningful relationship, hobby, etc. Closing parenthesis, comma, or that their home life is in shambles and they would rather avoid having to confront it head-on. Had a boss. I am a commercial plumber. Who put work above everything else. He was at work when his first child was born. He was at work when his mother and his father died. He was at work for most of both his kids' school or sports events. He missed his sister's wedding and doesn't know where his oldest daughter lives because she wants nothing to do with him because he is always at work. I don't provide therapy anymore now that I'm in research full-time. But I was always surprised how often adult patients would tell me something and then say, "I've never told anybody that before." So much pain could have been at least partially reduced by reaching out to a trusted person or professional. It still seems normal to many people that just bottling everything up in silence will somehow lead to improvement over time. I had found I was pregnant and then miscarried many years ago. It was my 6th miscarriage, so I thought I was immune to the emotional impact. At the time my husband's brother was dying, so I figured he had enough stress, so I never mentioned it to him. 6 months later I'm at my doctor for routine stuff and out of the blue he asks me if I'd made a decision about long-term contraception, and I suddenly let out a howl and started sobbing so badly I couldn't speak. I tried to tell him I was fine SND just to go to the next appointment because it wasn't a big deal, and the look he gave me made me see that it obviously was a big deal. I was eventually able to talk SND, explain that I hadn't been able to tell anyone, and he convinced me to go home SND tell my husband. Which I did. Buried emotions will come out whether through regular daily emotions or through a sudden outburst at the least opportune time. Avoid. When anything makes us anxious we tend to do this. To stay away from the thing that makes us uncomfortable. If it's a genuine threat that's fine. But all of the anxiety disorders have avoidance as a key perpetuating factor. Over time it doesn't just perpetuate. It enhances the anxiety and we can get very unwell. Arguably, all internalizing disorders, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, somatic disorders, have avoidance in common. And counteracting that avoidance through exposure therapy and behavioral activation is actually the #1 most consistently effective form of therapy we have for these conditions. Properly administered, these behavioral therapists can make a huge difference in people's lives, even if they've been struggling with these problems for a long time. Avoiding a problem and expecting to go away. I work with anxiety almost exclusively, and there is a plethora of things I hear that would fit your question, but avoidance is the first thing that popped into my head. People will avoid dealing with an issue and even build their wild world around avoiding an issue. There are your day-to-day problems people will ignore, like losing a wedding ring. That could be seen as reasonable BC, it will turn up, all the way to denying a problem that is greatly affecting their life. Easy example would be an alcoholic. They will get divorced, live single, live in a one-bedroom apt and work at Waffle House part-time with an advanced degree in chemistry just so they can continue to drink how they want. People who have a glass of wine, beer every night just to relax or take the edge off. But when you ask them if they could stop, they often find they can't and are more anxious and short-tempered without alcohol as a crutch also. People who willingly jam-pack their schedules. This is usually seen in parents, especially those with disabled children, where they feel like having their child enrolled in everything or getting therapy every day is the best options. It comes from a good place, but as a sign of denial, and when the busyness stops, it can take a real toll. Lastly, people who use humor to manage, deflect or hide emotions. It makes them seem happy and resilient to the outside world, but can be an unhealthy and emotionally stunting way to manage feelings. Here's several common issues. Never saying no. This is people-pleasing behavior and it winds up causing a lot of issues. It's common in women, because women are often raised to think they need to be, do, and take care of everything. Not having arguments, fights with family or partners. You would think this means that you have a great relationship and everything is fabulous. Really, it just means that some or all people involved are avoiding conflict. Conflict avoidance is a huge problem over time. Never being wrong. No one is ever right all the time. If someone is always right, then they might be displaying signs of a narcissistic personality, or potentially NPD. People can be pretty narcissistic without actually having NPD. Those people can still cause a lot of strife in their family's life. Using a substance daily, or regularly. Picture the parent who has a glass of wine every night after the kids go to bed. The person who smoked cannabis every evening before bed. The student who drinks every weekend. These are all behaviors that exhibit a functional dependency on a substance which can quickly escalate. Using substances is not an appropriate coping strategy. Speculating, worrying, ruminating over things that other people have said or done, this is so common. And such a small thing that everyone does. It can cause so many issues. Though, when the real solution is always communication. Communication is the #1 issue that people have. It's hard to talk to people about difficult and sensitive things. But it does get easier with practice. If everyone just always talked about things, their lives would be easier. ETA, please note that I am not making a comment about taking prescription medicines as directed or about using cannabis as a medication. Medical cannabis has a place in the world. I am strictly commenting about substances being used as coping strategies, which is an inappropriate use. It's normal, but that does not make it appropriate. Difficulty getting out of bed. Not everyone is a morning person, but depression can feel like one if walking through mud, where simple behaviors can feel harder or more tiresome. Also, avoiding phone calls, texts, etc. Marriage and family therapist here. I have a couple, but first a caveat: these will often require a third party to point it out in someone. It might be a therapist, friend, family, so, whatever. If you can notice these in yourself, kudos. You're probably pretty self-aware. 1. Being a mind reader. If you find yourself consistently acting or speaking as if you know what someone else is thinking, take a step back. Slow down, and make sure you understand the other's point of view. It's common for couples to get in ruts because one partner has a habit of assuming what the other is thinking. Yes, we get to know our partners well, And they could very well have a predictable reaction to something. Taking this predictability to the extreme, however, can be damaging. Similarly, assuming that someone knows how we're feeling is dangerous. We can't expect others to know we're upset or having a bad day and could use some comfort if we put on a brave face all the damn time. There are so many social stigmas with this, especially with men, that are understandable, yet still flawed. Learning to let people in is one of the best things we can do for our mental health. 2. Keeping constant on your so. Checking their phone, knowing where they are, who they're with all the time, etc. I wouldn't be surprised if there were trust issues going on here. This is most common with young couples because they are either 1. Modeling what they've seen in other relationships, or 2. Don't know how to manage their very normal anxiety. Especially if this is their first serious relationship. Edit, or if they've been in abusive or controlling relationships in the past. It's normal to feel somewhat insecure or even somewhat jealous, especially in young, early relationships. Using that as justification to keep constant tabs on your so, however, establishes an insecure foundation for the relationship going forward. Edit 2. Feeling emotions is always okay: jealous, anxious, angry, relieved, happy, etc. Closing parenthesis. It's the behaviors or manifestations of those emotions that we have to be careful with. Learning to change the way we do that can be very difficult, but possible. Fiancé is a Ph.D. psychologist working in consulting. Physically and emotionally abusive relationships are way too common, and most people don't even know that they're being abused. People seem to accept that it's normal for relationships to include yelling, berating, and physical violence if it's their partner doing it to them. Prime example is sexual assault. People, if your partner is forcing sexual acts on you that you don't consent to, even if you're in a committed relationship, it's rape. Being in a relationship with them doesn't give them total control over your body. And yet it's really common for people to just normalize being taken advantage of. Kinda scary to hear how many of these stories my fiancé has. From an outsider's perspective, it's really fucked up. I'll try to say this the best that I can. Knowing this topic is very nuanced. But 2 things that come to mind are 1. Emotional repression and 2. Codependency. For the first, a lot of people pride themselves on a suck it up mindset with emotions. That they can go through something difficult and barely, never cry or truly get upset. Typically this is because you've repressed natural emotional responses and are likely also limiting your range of positive emotions, i.e., you might not cry when you're really sad, but you may not feel truly excited when something good happens in your life, etc. It is nearly impossible to feel the highest highs in life if you numb yourself from the lows. Also, when you numb your emotions, they don't magically go away. They are often stored in your body or internalized or externalized in unhealthy maladaptive ways. For the second, codependency is super common. A lot of people struggle with addiction in various forms. And most people in their life will know and love someone who is an addict. A strong relationship between an addict and their partner, children, parent, etc. often leads to codependency issues. This can look different but oftentimes includes saying yes to everything, monitoring everyone else's emotions and feeling responsible to tend to them to keep the peace, putting others' wants and needs before your own, etc. And unfortunately in religious communities or for women in general, this can actually be praised instead of seen as problematic thinking and behavior that needs to be changed. I'm in the process of getting my MA in clinical psych at the moment. Parents who talk about everything that's wrong with their kids as though they didn't raise those kids and condition the issues themselves. Things like, I just don't know why she's so mad all the time. Or, God, he's just unbearable. Most kids act up because of how a parent has raised them. Also, parents who diagnose their children without getting a professional opinion. Shockingly common. Really unhealthy. You might know your kid best, but you don't know the DSM best. I'm not currently a practicing therapist. But one of the things I learned in social work school was that suicidal ideation isn't normal. As in, thinking a normal amount about killing yourself is not thinking about it at all. Those with suicidal ideation think it's normal for everyone to be thinking about it. When really it's more normal for the thought not even to pop into your head, and definitely not normal for it to be something you think about on a regular basis. That disassociation is a coping mechanism, in that they believe it's a good trait for dealing with stressful encounters. If you can't remember the details or actively engage in reacting to a situation, you're not taking yourself out of danger. See it in children and adults for a range of situations. From interacting with abusive spouses and parents simply saying that they space out and can't even recall what was said. I've always worked with serious mental illness like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, so my experience might be a bit more specialized. But if you have someone in your life with an illness like that and they're on medication, or they have a certain routine structure in their life, don't dismiss it or encourage them to take a break. If they need to get a blood test to get their medication, they need to get a shot, or even just help getting to the pharmacy, try and help them out. Those really small things help. I've heard so many families be dismissive and treat their loved one's illness like high cholesterol or something. Skip your cholesterol meds for a couple days and you're probably fine. Skip antipsychotics for a couple days, break a good routine. Stay up late, skip meals, and all of a sudden they develop psychosis. Become too much to handle. Lose their housing, their possessions, end up on the street and need hospitalization before they recover. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. See you next time.